You name it, it's been in the back of it.
Cows, right?
Cows, had cows in the back of it. Yeah, it's all cows in it, and we managed to get it stuck out in a pasture somewhere. But that was an interesting day.
Well, it's time for another project. I'm on my way to my buddy Jonathan's house because he's got an old Ford pickup that's been sitting for like 13 years in the basement of his parents' house, and they're selling that property, so it's got to get out. And I figure we might as well get it running again and get it back on the road. So I'm gonna do some work on the thing for him, and he's gonna get to drive his grandpa's old truck again. So we're on our way over there. He's up ahead of me with our trailer attached to his truck. We're on our way to go grab it. Should be good. Check out this crazy driveway. I don't know if you can see this, but it's just 2 strips of concrete. Towing a car down this, it's gonna be mighty interesting, I'm sure. All right, so we made it here. Now, walking down to the backyard, gotta formulate a plan of attack to get this thing out of here. Let's show you guys the truck. Oh goodness. This is gonna be difficult, isn't it? I'm glad I brought the 4x4, because we're probably gonna need it.
Well, my name is John Goolsby, and this truck belonged to my grandfather. He's the one that bought it new in Frankston, Texas in 1965. It's a farm truck. He had a job as a county commissioner of roads in Rusk, Texas, in Cherokee County, and it was just like the trucks that the county would buy him to do his job in. So he bought this in 1965, brand new after he retired. It's 65 Ford, 240 cubic inch, inline 6, 3-speed on the column. It came with a couple of options on it at the time. One of them is missing. It's a grill guard that goes across the front, and then the other one is the bumper on the back, a step bumper, and the step bumper is engraved with the name of the dealer he bought it from. It says Frankston, Texas. I think the truck was sold new for about $1,675 or something like that.
And there's the truck. This thing is super cool. Dog dishes with a thin white wall. Just classy. The spare tire up here, I'm a fan. Steak sides on the bed. Ooh, look at that bumper. That is cool. And here you go. Last time it was tagged, 2008. So 12 years. You said sitting 13 years, so it was registered in 2008. This thing is so cool. Got a whole bunch of accessories going on inside. It's got a CB radio. I like it.
Dad just didn't want to drive it anymore. It's a little difficult, you know, 3 on the tree.
Yeah, inline 6, 3 on the tree, no synchro going into first. That's not fun to drive. But
not for him.
Well, it's not fun to drive.
For me, fun for you to drive.
Like, I have a truck very similar to this. It's a Chevy, but I understand why it's difficult. It's manual brakes, probably drum brakes, I would imagine. Yeah, so not the most fun to drive around modern cars, especially.
He's run into a few things. Took out a telephone pole with it once, and a couple other cars. And...
Is that what happened to this side?
Yeah, that's what the.
So it's got some character on this side, as we like to call that. A few little dents and scrapes. That could probably be hammered out pretty easy. Ooh, is that a Chick-fil-A cow?
It is.
We know these are good people now.
He drove it until he's passing away in 1969. And so she and my dad drove it back from Rusk, Texas, which is in eastern Texas, drove it to Atlanta, Georgia. And then upon the day we got married, I married my wife, my dad gave me the truck so I could haul her and all our belongings to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I was stationed at the time as a young second lieutenant in the 1st Corps Support Command.
So it just sat in his basement, never got started, and kind of just got neglected.
Right.
At least it's been inside, I will say that much.
Didn't have the money to put into it. When you don't have the money to put into a luxury, like, there's no need for a 65 Ford pickup truck.
Yeah.
So driving this will be a recreational truck.
Look at that, inline 6. Do you know what size inline 6 it is? Is it a 300 or?
I don't remember.
I know they had a 200 inline six, they had a 300 inline six, but it changed as the years went on. Cute single barrel carburetor. You know, lots of horsepower. Ooh, my favorite parts, these old trucks. Single pot master cylinder, so if one of your 4 brakes fail, you lose all brakes. But we're not gonna actually do any work to this thing here. This house is being sold, so they need the truck gone. And we're just gonna drag it up the hill with the Jeep, take it back to the shop and get it running there because, you know, I have all my tools and stuff there, so it's a little easier. It's got 4 tires on it, they have air in them. It looks like we'll be able to get it out of here today. And now that I said that, it's probably gonna be an utter nightmare. Anyway, let's make it happen.
And so I moved her to Fort Bragg with all of our worldly possessions stacked in the back of this truck with a tarp over the back of it. And we set up housekeeping at Fort Bragg, and it didn't get driven a lot, but we would take it out on weekends. We went camping in it. I built a camper shell for the back that has long since disappeared. When I got off active duty, I moved us back to College Park in it, along with a U-Haul truck then, because we also had a bunch more to move back. And I drove it to work just about every day until 1993 when I got a different car as a daily driver.
I'm just gonna push it just to the edge of the garage. How easy is this gonna be, or is it gonna be incredibly difficult? Oh man, it rolls easy. We're in business. Oh gosh, maybe not too easy.
Well, I stopped pushing to come grab the steering wheel.
Okay. Oh. Come on! Alright, so we know it moves. So now that we got it to the edge of the hill, let's find out if we have any brakes whatsoever. Nope, I'd say that's a negative. That's nothing. So we got a 3 on the tree, and the fact that this is a manual is gonna help us right now because we can use the transmission to actually stop the truck. So you have a clutch pedal and a manual shifter. You leave it down in first. When you start rolling the truck, you just feather the clutch out and use the clutch as a brake. That's in theory. We could, it could get sketchy.
Oh, come on. Right, just give me my momentum.
All right, let me test it and make sure the clutch stops it.
You still pushing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, it doesn't do anything. Hang on. Are you pushing still?
I'm holding it now.
Okay, let me get a block of wood. I don't think the clutch is doing anything. So, tried to use the clutch to stop the truck and it doesn't stop. New plan. I'm not used to old vehicles that actually have working e-brakes. This thing has a working e-brake. It's the old pull it out and then, you know, twist it and put it back in, which I've always loved. I don't know if it's that the shifter isn't adjusted right. It doesn't seem to go into first, but it does go into reverse, so you can stop the truck with the clutch in reverse. So now we have that and an e-brake, so the chances of not dying just went up a whole lot. Maybe. We're gonna try this again. Take 2.
We're going.
Oh yeah.
Let's stop.
Do a little more. No one's catching it all. We're good. It literally hasn't moved for 13 years, and look, it's out in the sunlight again. It rolled a whole 35 feet, but it at least rolled.
We did a lot of camping trips in it, used it for all kinds of stuff, hauling everything from topsoil to yard sale stuff in it, taking kids back and forth to school, to going with friends out to Stone Mountain and sitting in the back of it. And that was before people got all bent out of shape over seat belts and everything else, and everybody sat in the back to sit on the bed, and you know, it was just a different time. We had a lot of good times in it.
The thing is, like, you know, it's got its dents and scrapes and stuff, but this truck has been inside for 13 years. So even though it sat for a long time, it really, you rinse it off and it's good to go. Now we got to drag it out of the yard. Time to go get the Jeep. It's basically a tractor. All right, Jeep, it's your time to shine. The beauty of having 4-wheel drive. Let's see what we can do. All right, time to put her in 4-low. So now, gotta find somewhere to attach this thing to the truck. Even though I rag on Fords, they're actually kind of cool. Especially with bumper stickers like that. Real men, they don't ask for directions. Yeah, we wander along aimlessly and pretend like we know where we're going. I'll just pull on the axle, I guess. It's pretty wild the way it's set up. So I thought this was just a simple straight axle under here, but it's actually kind of like early twin I-beam. So this axle over here is separate from this axle over here, so they can move independently. It's early independent front suspension. It's kind of cool. All right. That should do the trick in theory. Now you're driving the truck, I'm driving the Jeep. So you gotta watch out for trees through that windshield you can't see anything through.
You just have it in reverse right now, correct?
Yeah, just if you need to use the brakes, just release the clutch and it'll stop the truck if something goes wrong. That went way better than I actually expected. I didn't expect it to go that well, but the Jeep didn't even spin a tire coming up the hill. The truck acted fine. He didn't hit any trees driving it through that dusty windshield. And look, it's out on a driveway for the first time in over a decade. Is this weird to you?
Feels a little strange.
It's nice though, right?
It's like a coming home, you know, kind of deal. It's like one of those things where you've wanted to do it for years and years, and now you finally get to. And so I'm enjoying it.
It's out in the sunlight. It looks good too. It's a beautiful day here in Georgia, 70 degrees outside.
And now I'm passing it on to my son so he can experience some good times in it. He's gonna teach himself how to drive the 3 on the column and make smooth shifts and get used to the finicky brakes and everything else that goes with a truck this age that has no power, nothing, except what's in your arms and in your legs. No power steering, no power brakes, no air conditioning except what I call 240 air, which is 40 miles an hour with both windows rolled down.
Well, you say 40 because it won't do much more.
That's right.
You
don't want to drive it much faster than 40 miles an hour. If you get it up to 50 or 55, it's kind of exciting. You know, it just feels like you're flying along at 100 miles an hour. The front end gets a little bit loose. But, it's not because it's wore out. It's just it's not made to go any faster than about 40 or 45 miles an hour.
So we're gonna hook the winch up to it, pull the sucker up on the trailer, and drag it to the shop, and probably let it sit there for entirely too long, and then work on it and get it on the road. So now, I gotta find something to hook to. That might work. Oh yeah, that's not going anywhere. You know, you have to say that or it comes loose. It's a requirement. Oh, and check it out. We are very spoiled. Wireless winch. Now start bringing it back. I think my battery's dying. That's unfortunate. So of course, the battery died for the winch. So now we got some jumper cables running to the Jeep to make it work again. Come on, little winch, you can do it. Now bring it this way a touch towards me. Now start cutting it back just a little, just gradual like that, yeah. You might have to stop it with the clutch if it tries to roll once it's up on the flat surface. But look at that, it's getting on the trailer. I love putting cars on a trailer with one finger. It's way easier than the old-fashioned way with a come along. Cut it left towards driver's side. Yeah, keep cutting that way like you have it. Straighten out. All right, clutch. Woo! I told you it might do that.
I didn't know how far.
Yeah, you're good there. That's probably enough tongue weight. There we go. It's on the trailer. So, there's a lot of debate out there over how to actually strap a vehicle down on a trailer. Some people will swear that you're supposed to cross the straps. Other people will swear you're supposed to go straight. Some people put the straps over the entire vehicle. That's always wrong. Never do that. That's bad. But there's a lot of reason as to why you don't actually cross straps. So I'm talking when you throw your straps on, you do kind of like an X. It works. And I guess the idea is that you keep the car from shifting to side, but if one of these straps is to break, this strap is too long to actually keep the vehicle from rocking back and forth, and your car could actually fly off the trailer. If you go straight with the straps, and they're like that, and one strap breaks, it still can't move back and forth if it's the same way at the front. So I always run my straps parallel with each other rather than crossing them. I don't know, let me know in the comments what you guys do and why you do what you do rather than just screaming at me like some of you like to. So I'm gonna strap this down, then we'll be back on the road. I just wanted to give you a little tech tip there. So we still gotta deal with our loose ends. Up front, we got a winch on here. So I'm just gonna pull that sucker tight now that the back straps are tight. Don't just tow with your winch, because you know, the sprag inside here could fail and your car can go flying off the trailer. Still put straps on it, but as an extra safety measure, I like to leave the winch attached. I struggle with ropes and straps, or at least I used to. Now I've done it so much, I'm kind of used to it. But for a long time, if I ever touched a rope or an extension cord, it just turned to like 37 knots immediately. So the requirement before you leave, yep, that's not going anywhere. If you don't say that, your car will fall off the trailer. It is a scientific fact. So we're ready to hit the road. Back to Sally's Speed Shop. So now let's hope we don't pop a tire going down that interesting driveway. Oh no, the whole front end sliding. Get back on the pavement. That was sketchy. Nice and slow. I think we made it with no flat tires. Sure, the truck almost slid off the driveway, but this truck was fine. Did you see your front tire was sliding like all the way down the hill?
I felt it. I was like, oh no.
Yeah, it was sliding like right here, like just locked up, pushing off the driveway.
Like, I need to keep my tires on.
But look, we made it. So now it's on the main road where we can actually hurt other people.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I saw this old ride listed for sale, 10 years old, and it looked like hell. All my friends said don't, I replied, oh Lord. It's an F-150 long bed fold. It stores my tools, can haul a load, but it drinks up gas and now I'm broke. But it's got a little attitude, ain't it grand? It loves the mud, as well as the sand. It defines me who I am. It's more than practical, it's a statement. If you ever think I'll sell it, good luck. American made, and it's my truck.
And just like that, we're back at the shop. And the truck's still there. So we got her turned around where the back of the trailer's pointing downhill. It's good there. And that way we can unload it and control the speed with the winch and just right on down into the shop. So, to unload it, all you gotta do is hit one button. And there she goes, nice and easy. And that is how you unload a truck with one finger. Clutch! The clutch didn't stop it! It popped out of gear! That was terrifying. I thought I was about to destroy my building and then hit something in here, but we're all good! was sketchy. It popped out of gear as soon as I let the clutch out. It dropped out of reverse, and then there's no getting it back in once it's rolling.
Yeah.
Woo, boy! All right, that's how it's supposed to go. Yeah. That was not good. Don't do what I do, kids. Put vehicles into the shop the smart way when they don't have brakes. Like actually bring the trailer down and unload it right in front of the door. I've done that like 6 times, and it's not been a problem because all the vehicles have stopped. That one didn't want to stop, so I had to jump out and stop the truck with my body. And it was moving at least 10, 15 miles an hour. But we got it in here. It's actually where I wanted it, and I didn't hit anything. So I'm gonna call it a win. And now I'm gonna go try to calm down because that was terrifying. But this thing is just gonna sit here for a minute because I got some other projects to get done. I got some more stuff to do to the shop here. And then I'll be back and we'll get the 65 Ford pickup on the road for Jonathan here. Is it a good day or a sketchy day?
It's been a fun day. It's been a fun day.
Most people, you bring their car, they don't even get to interact with the owner while bringing the car to the shop. They have to call a tow truck. Then the tow truck comes and picks up their car and drops it off at the shop, and there's no interaction. He got to be a part of the story today.
Jacob has a personal experience for each of you.
It's more fun, and I'm in this for fun, not for money, which is why I'm probably gonna fail. But it'll be fine.
We've had a lot of fun in it though. Had a lot of fun in it. A lot of different adventures. There's a dent in the door over there that's a result of my brother missing a cat, which I better not say that for cat lovers who might be watching. We had a long discussion about it. Would have been better to hit the cat, but we didn't.
So I've already given you a brief overview of this truck when we dug it out of the basement, but we haven't really dug into it any further. And the cool thing about this truck is all the history that it actually has in this family. So we're gonna dig into this glove box and see what we can find, because I bet there's some cool stuff in here. Like that. That would be the original owner's manual, which is super cool. It's not in great shape, it's kind of falling apart, but it's actually got the details of his grandpa who bought this thing brand new out in Texas. How cool is that? So awesome. It's got the truck owner identification. I don't know what else is in here, but something about changing the water pump. Oh goodness. Name tag from when he worked at the Great American Cookie Company at Perimeter Mall. How cool is that? Automobile portfolio, about insurance and registration, oil filler cap, all kinds of little neat things. A New Testament, Psalms and Proverbs. That's pretty cool. I hope that's a rag and not underwear. I'm just gonna say it's a rag. But yeah, all kinds of cool stuff in here, dating back to when this truck was actually brand new, which is super cool. And if you look around in here, Moby's just hanging out being in the way, but this guy's got all kinds of cool stuff. He's got a CB radio, he's got an aftermarket Spark-O-Matic radio in here, little things hanging from the mirror, and a bunch of little random knickknacks. Good news for modern man. Who knows? I was told the last time this ran was in 2006, 2007. So that checks out with this insurance policy card that expired in October of 2007. So this thing hasn't been on the road in 13 years, maybe 14 years. I think it'll fire right up and run though. Don't you think so, Mobes? Yeah. I mean, it is a Ford, not a Chevy, but I still give it a good chance because old cars, they just want to run.
Used to use it when I was in the restaurant business to haul produce in. I'd go to the farmer's market, pick stuff up, take to the restaurant, haul cookie dough around in the back of it to different various cookie stores, and you name it, it's been in the back of it. Railroad ties,
Cows, right?
cows,
There's a
had
cow?
cows in the back of it. Yeah, it's all cows in it. Yeah, there's a particularly interesting story helping my grandfather move a couple of cows. And we managed to get it stuck out in a pasture somewhere, but that was an interesting day. We waited for the engine to cool off because it was too hot to start it. Vapor locked on us while trying to get it out, so I had to walk off and go down to the creek and mess around, do a little fishing, wait for the engine to cool off, and then come back up and finish our job.
Anyway, let's dig in under the hood and see what's going on up there.
Oh, this hood latch is stiff.
There we go. That is a tower of power right there. Check it out. Got a little inline 6, single barrel carburetor, 3-speed on the tree, and one of my favorite parts, the old single pop master cylinders. And as you can see, it's about the bare necessities to make this thing run. We already got a fuel hose to bypass the factory tank to the pump, which is really good because you don't want to run a bunch of sediment and rust from your old tank down into your carburetor and through your fuel pump. So we got that taken care of. And then we got old point style distributor with its coil. So really only a couple things can go wrong in there, and it's super easy to address if something has actually failed. Single barrel carburetor, super easy to go through and make them work even if you don't have a rebuild kit. And of course, the old trusty Ford starter solenoid up on the fender. It's really the only things you need to look at under here before firing a car. Obviously, checking your oil and changing your oil is a good idea, but even if you don't do that, typically the oil that's in them, you can still fire them up for a second and make sure they run. So let's dive into this thing and see what we can find out. So first things first, we're gonna drain the old oil out of it, see what it looks like. Ooh, minimal spillage. It's pretty good. We'll let that drain out and see what it looks like. And now that we've let that drain, it's time to put the plug back in, like so. Snug that sucker up. And now let's go work on that filter. One of the really nice things about these inline 6s here is the filter is right there on the side of the block. Super easy to get to. Granted, you never know how tight it's gonna be. Apparently pretty tight. I'm gonna go grab a pair of pliers. Or better yet, how about an oil filter wrench? Oh yeah, having the right tool helps a lot. Ooh, look at how nice and black that is. Looks thick. And before you put your new filter on, obviously make sure it's got the rubber gasket on there. Then you're actually gonna want to put a little bit of oil on this sucker before you put it on the engine. So that way it gets a nice good seal. And then you just take it down in here, throw it right back where the old one was. And you go till it touches, so you see it just made contact and stopped spinning. And then you go about 1/2 to 3/4 of a turn further. And that is plenty. Do not get a wrench and crank down on that guy, because then you will never get it off. That is plenty of torque to keep it on there. And now that we've drained out the old oil and changed the filter, it's time to put in some new oil. And that way we get some nice fresh stuff lubricating these cylinders that haven't moved in quite some time. Oh, that's the perfect pour. Now we've got that full, we want to check the oil level and make sure we are good to go. And as you can see, we are right on the full mark. Granted, that's going to go down a little once we run the engine, but that's good enough to start it. So, now that we got oil in it, it's time to pull off this air cleaner, see how the carburetor looks, maybe throw a little fuel down its throat, and see if we can get this sucker to run. Yeah, buddy. Alrighty, so we want to look at the carburetor before we really try to do anything so that we know nothing's going to get sucked down its throat. Granted, this thing has had an air cleaner on it since it was parked, so it's probably totally fine. You can also lose the wing nut just like I just did, but also look inside the filter and you can see that's fairly clean. So I don't think we're gonna have any issues with any mice nest or anything, which is always good. I'm gonna set this out of the way, take a look down its throat, work the throttle a little bit, see what it looks like. Everything's nice and free. The choke is wide open. Probably gonna close that a little bit. it's got a manual choke, but it doesn't appear to be hooked up anymore. So I might hook that back up if this thing runs. But for now, I'm just gonna try to feed some gasoline down into the float bowl and see if she'll turn over and catch fire. I mean, the good kind of fire inside, not the kind of fire that burns your car to the ground. Yeah. I know you can't smell through the camera, but yeah, that does not smell good. Whew, that is varnishy as all get out. Definitely smells like mid-2000s. Not good. So now I got a little gasoline in a water bottle here. Not super high tech, but should do the trick for getting some gasoline down to that float bowl. Just gotta pour it in the vent very carefully and slowly as I flood the entire carburetor with gasoline. That should do the trick though. Let's hook up this battery and see what happens. So we got some pretty ancient looking battery terminals on this thing, but they should do the trick to at least get this sucker running. Look at that ground cable, that thing is beautiful. Little tap tap, make sure we got a good connection. And now we'll go turn the key and see what happens. Also, it's never a bad idea to have one of these handy just in case it actually does catch on fire. You want to be able to put it out quick before any real damage happens. So I'm gonna leave this here. Once I find out it's actually gonna run, I'll clean out the factory tank. I'll maybe take the carburetor off and clean it out a little bit, and then see if we can get this thing running and driving. But that's gonna involve looking at some other systems like the brakes, the cooling system, and making sure everything is working as it should. So for starters, I'm gonna go in there and bump the key and see if this thing will fire off. Come on, get out of there. Come on. That's a good boy. Good boy. First of all, we need to make sure it's in neutral. You ready, Bobby? All right, so that just ran absolutely no problem. I bumped the key over, worked just as it should, and it totally ran there for a second. So now I'm gonna feed a little bit more gasoline into those float bowls and see if she'll really run. Man, this might be really, really easy. All right, that ought to be more than enough. Let's try this again. Well, it doesn't seem like the carburetor is exactly carbureting. So let's see if I can bump this thing over and actually make it catch and run a little bit longer. See if that makeshift fuel system will work or explode. Let's try that again. There we go. Sure, for a good long second there, just being bottle fed. Sure, it could backfire through the carburetor and catch this whole thing on fire, and that would be pretty spectacular, but it seems to be pretty well in time and wants to run. So I think I'm just gonna feed some gasoline to this line that I have rigged up, and I think she'll go. I think she'll light off and run, and the throttle pedal's still hooked up, so this might be way easier than it should be, but that's pretty cool. Sat for 13 years, and there you go. She's running. Well, there we go. We got a little fuel system rigged up. Rubber hose is just tucked into that fuel can right there. I poured a little gasoline down the carburetor. Let's see what happens. Oh, she wants to run. It wants to run. That's always a good sign. Oh man, she is running better and better every time. Let's see if we can get a little more out of her. clearly not pumping its own gas at this point, so I'm gonna see if the pump is actually pulling fuel by disconnecting it from the actual engine and trying to pull some fuel through the tank while I run the engine off of this bottle right here. Alrighty, so I was pulling off the fuel lines from the pump to make sure we were actually getting pressure from the pump, and I actually got fuel to spray everywhere. You can actually see it still dripping out of the pump, but apparently it's pressurizing this line all the way to the carburetor. So I'm gonna have to actually pull this apart, clean the needle and seat, make sure the carburetor looks good inside, and then fuel should flow freely from the pump to the carburetor, down into the manifold, and make the engine run. Right now, there's some sort of blockage inside the carburetor, which I'm going to assume is a stuck float. We need to get that clear before fuel will flow freely through the carburetor. I think this is totally fine though. And just like that, a couple fittings, some linkage, and 2 bolts, and we got the carburetor off the truck. So now we can clean this thing out, away from the vehicle, and see what's wrong inside. So let's take this over to the table and take a peek inside. What do you think, Moby? You like the smell of gasoline? Nope, not so much. Smart dog. I will say, don't ever rule out the possibility that it's something simple like the fuel line from the pump to the carburetor is just clogged, but it's not that. Air flows through that nicely, even though it tastes like crap. So that's good. So the problem is clearly inside here. What we have here is, I assume, a single barrel Motorcraft carburetor. You can see the Ford logo on this tag here. And all we have is a handful of flathead screws holding the entire top on. And then once we take all those out, we'll be able to see the insides and hopefully find out why this thing isn't flowing any fuel. Uh-oh. Losing all kinds of stuff. It's not actually that dirty inside. I just tore the gasket getting it off, so I'm gonna have to order a new gasket, little rebuild kit for this guy, get it cleaned up and put back in the truck. See, that needle and seat is locked up solid. Yeah, this is supposed to move in and out like that. There we go, it's at least moving now. So we're gonna change the needle and seat out and put this sucker back together with some new gaskets, and I think it'll work just fine. As you can see, it's really not that dirty inside, but the needle wasn't moving freely at all, so that's kind of what was causing fuel to not go in, and this is the float. Don't hear any fuel inside of it, so I think the float is still good. We'll just change out the needle and the seat, as well as obviously get some new gaskets, because kind of destroyed this one getting it apart. And then we'll reassemble this whole thing with it all nice and clean, and should work perfectly on the truck. But in the meantime, I'm letting the gas siphon out of the gas tank in this truck so that we can get rid of all this old, gross, varnishy stuff. And man, does it smell terrible. That is awful. So yeah, we'll let that drain, pull the cap off, make sure it can get some air. When that's empty, we'll flush it out with some nice clean gasoline, make sure she's good to go to run off her own tank. I will say, at least it's coming out fairly clean, even if it is old and varnishy. That's always a good sign that the gas tank isn't rusty and full of debris. Right, Mobes? You wanna go for a car ride? Oh yeah, you do. I got a Walker carburetor rebuild kit, so I'm gonna go through this little Ford 1100 single barrel carburetor and put all new gaskets and a new needle and seat, set the float height, replace the check balls, and just clean everything up and make it work just right.
Off-road tires with V-locks on. Dude, it's got a little attitude, ain't it grand? It does the mud as well as the sand. It defines me who I am. It defines me who I am. I jacked it up, put on lifted off-road tires with V-locks on. Dude, it's got a little attitude, ain't it grand? It does the mud as well as the sand. It defines me who I am. It's more than practical, it's a statement. If you ever think I'll sell it, good luck. American made, and it's my...
Alrighty, so I just went through this single barrel carburetor, got it all freshened up. You know, didn't do a crazy rebuild on it, just went through and put a new needle and seat in it, new gaskets, and a new spark valve, so it should be good to go back on the car. I also hooked up the choke linkage, which was disconnected, so that'll help it run a lot better. And we're just gonna toss it back on here and see what happens. Got a little gas can set up over here with a rubber line feeding the fuel pump, which then feeds the carburetor. And now I have a little bottle full of fuel I'm gonna prime the carburetor with down into the vent tube. And apparently everywhere else too. We got the battery hooked up already. All right, let's see how that does. Well, it ran, but I don't think it's pulled fuel up to the carburetor yet. And in case you're wondering why I'm holding the hammer, that's just in case the float sticks and it starts gushing gas everywhere. A couple taps generally takes care of that. So let's give her a little more juice, see what happens. Yeah, I don't think it's getting gas up here yet. All right, let's see if that changes anything. Well, it ran good there for a minute. Try to figure out what that noise was, but the thing runs off of its own fuel pump with the carburetor. The choke works, everything seems to be working fine. It's got oil pressure, the alternator's charging. There is a horrible squealing noise, but I'm gonna look into that in a second, see if I can find out what's going on. I really need to put some coolant in it, see if anything leaks, and then just give her a quick little tune-up. And then I'll be checking brakes and seeing if the thing actually drives with the clutch and everything. So yeah, not too bad though. Just a little carburetor rebuild, checking the points, checking where power's going, and firing her up after sitting for 13 years. Old cars just want to run. It's what they do. Well, I think I found my noise. That is not a clutch fan. That is a solid metal fan, and I can spin it without spinning the engine because it's just slipping on the pulley right here. So I need to tighten up the alternator, and I think that will resolve that squealing noise. I'm also going to top off the radiator. There is some coolant down in there. I can't quite reach it with my finger, but that shows me that the coolant system is in fact intact and will hold water. So that's a good sign. I think this is going to be pretty straightforward. Oh man, filled it right up to the top. Almost like I planned it. Should be good to run it again and see what it does. Now that it's got coolant in it and a tightened up belt, maybe it will not squeal so much. We'll find out. Think it'll fire up with no gas added to the carburetor? I think so. Let's find out. little love, but there we go, it runs, it doesn't squeal. It's much happier than it was before that belt was tight. Now we just gotta let her get a little heat in her, and I think she'll be good to go. But before I do that, I'm gonna add some gas to the factory tank, take off this auxiliary tank, and try to run it off its own fuel tank now that I've cleaned that out. For those that don't know, on old pickup trucks, the gas tank is actually inside the cab because they want you to die in a fiery explosion when you wreck your truck. So just fill it up right here behind the door and she'll be good to go. There we go. Now, let's see if it'll run off its own tank. It runs pretty good, but I see a few problems, and let me show them to you real quick. So I don't know if you can see this, but down in here, that freeze plug right there is leaking coolant. I think it's corroded to the point where it's actually seeping out down there on the side of the block. There's a massive exhaust leak right here, but it at least runs, it makes oil pressure, the alternator charges. That's a good start. So we'll have to drain the coolant back out of it, change the freeze plug. I'm gonna have to look into lubing up this linkage because the shifter feels really wonky. I'm also going to have to check over the brakes. Gonna give the owner a little update on his truck and what I'm running into. And then I'm gonna fix the freeze plug and the brakes and then go drive it and see what else might need done to get this thing back on the road. Alrighty, so we got a fresh parts order in for the F100. I got plug wires, I got a distributor cap, I got freeze plugs for it, new spark plugs, as well as an exhaust manifold and intake manifold gasket, and an exhaust gasket donut, as well as a valve cover gasket to get the top of this engine cleaned up and keep it from leaking coolant like it was. So I'm gonna dig into the side of this thing, pull the carburetor back off, pull the exhaust and intake manifold off together, do a little cleaning and organizing, and make it all nice and pretty in there. So yeah, just a tune up in a box basically. Should get this thing going nicely. So now that we got that crusty old exhaust and intake manifold out of the way, we have nice access down to the freeze plugs on the side of the block, so I can change them out because they've corroded from sitting for so long. I can also change that blown out gasket there, as well as the donut gasket, which seems to be missing entirely. I'm gonna clean up the gasket surface with my trusty old scraper that used to belong to my grandpa. I'm also draining the coolant out of the radiator. Then we'll be popping out those freeze plugs on the side of the block down there. But I love this little paint scraper. I don't know if you guys have any tools that remind you of family. This belonged to my grandpa, who unfortunately passed away about 10 years ago. But I get to think about him every time I use it. And I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, I'm gonna get to work cleaning this up in here. now that we got the side of the block cleaned up, I have some brand new Melling freeze plugs. These are 1 5/8" brass plugs to replace the 5 that you can see there on the side. I'm gonna knock the old ones out with a punch and a trusty old hammer, knock these guys in, and then we shouldn't have any more leaks. I do recommend putting a little RTV on the outside of these when you knock them in, just to ensure they have a good seal all the way around the edge. Anyway, here we go. All right, I'm gonna see if I can punch a hole in it and then pull it out with a pick. Oh yeah, perfect. Now I got this pick, and hopefully I can just hook it and pull this girl out. Yeah, it's pretty stuck in there. I think I'm gonna have to hit it harder with a hammer and knock it in first. There we go. Now we're really making a mess. Yeah, buddy. Now a pair of vice grips. Grab onto that sucker. There we go. Just like that, there's one freeze plug out. You could see where it was actually so brittle that I broke it just hitting it with the punch. So there's one out, got to do the other 4 on the side of the block and then punch in the new ones. Alrighty, so just a hammer, a punch, a pair of vice grips, and a nice angled pick. Got all these out in about 10 minutes. As you can see, they were very corroded to the point where just touching them with a hammer put holes in them, and that's not even where I was hitting. So that one's busted. That one's still moderately intact, but still very corroded. That one's pretty intact but corroded, and then these two were also corroded to the point where they got holes in them. So when this thing got up to temp, it just blew these out and started leaking. So we're gonna throw in these nice fresh brass ones, and they should be good for a long time. Before I put the new freeze plug in, I like to put a little RTV around the outside edge. So this will take care of any imperfections and make sure it seals just like it's supposed to. Yep. Now just a socket that fits inside of the freeze plug, just like so, with a little 1/2" extension stuck in the back of it. And you take this thing, slide it into place, a few taps with the hammer. All right, the bottom's in, switch to a bigger socket. And there we go. Now just repeat 4 more times. And then wipe away the extra RTV, of course. And there you go, just like that. All new freeze plugs in the side of the block. That brass looks mighty fine in there. I gotta say, not too hard. Gotta like working on inline 6s. Alrighty, now that I got the freeze plugs done on the other side, it's time to move on to this side of the engine where I can do the cap and rotor and plugs and wires. Just give it a basic ignition system tune-up. Nothing crazy because it did run, just replacing some components that are probably a little corroded and junky from sitting. So I'm gonna do that real quick, and then we'll work on cleaning up the intake and exhaust manifold, throwing some new gaskets on it, and putting this thing back together and getting it back on the road. Right, Mobes? Gonna get it back on the road and go for a car ride. Yeah.
Funny things will never go away. It's who we are. We drink iced tea out of jars. We ride in trucks, put our time in at the farm. Nothing wrong with a little southern charm. It's who we are. Born and raised to have a loving.
You gotta love working on inline 6s, because just like that, only about 10 minutes later, we got a new cap and rotor, new wires, and new plugs. They're not quite as cool as a V8, but there is so much room to work in here that, man, it's just convenient. So got that done. Now we're gonna work on valve cover and cleaning up the engine and then doing the exhaust and intake manifold again. Yep, we're making progress. We got a slight gap in the last time I filmed on the old F100 here and what it actually looks like now. So I took the intake and exhaust manifold off, cleaned them up, stripped them down, painted it, and I also took off the valve cover, cleaned it up and painted it, and replaced the gaskets. Good, it's full of coolant again. The carburetor's hooked up, the linkage is hooked up, so we're gonna fire it up and see how it does. So, fingers crossed, it acts like it's supposed to. Battery's hooked back up. The engine is looking so much better with that paint on it and all cleaned up with new wires and cap and rotor. Ports of gas down the carburetor. Now let's see what happens when we hit the key. Come inside the cabin, make sure it's in neutral, pull the choke, and the key is over here on this side. Make sure the clutch is pushed in. Let's see what happens. Fired right up. Don't think it's got gas up to it yet, but it's running good. Give it a little bit more air by pushing the choke in. There we go. Look how smooth that old girl is. I don't hear an exhaust leak anymore, so that's nice. Now we'll let it get a little bit of temp in it and see if it leaks anymore from the freeze plugs. Fuel gauge doesn't seem to work, but that's not surprising. The radio does, though. Jamming out. She's a runner. A little bit of smoke, but not excessive. Engine's running pretty good. Trying to figure out what we're dealing with temp-wise on the cooling system. Back freeze plug is around 160 right now. Radiator is still room temp. Thermostat housing getting up around 120-ish. So, running smooth and quiet though. So that's good. That actually sounds pretty good for a straight 6. Nice and clean, no smoke coming out. Seems pretty solid. Just had the old girl running for a few minutes, and would you believe it? The temp gauge actually works in here. How freaking awesome is that? She's running pretty good. That's a happy motor. Making good oil pressure, not making any weird noises, no more exhaust leaks. Cooling system is working just like it should. Now, we just need to go through the brakes and then get this old girl cleaned up and back on the road. You might see that round speedometer, gauge cluster. Generally that means you're in a Ford. So I'm driving Jonathan Goolsby's 65 Ford F100 that hasn't been on the road in 13 years. Got the brakes done today, and we're cruising. I'll be supervising, making sure there's no weird noises or anything. It's running about 180 degrees. The alternator light is off, the oil light is off, and we're road in 3rd gear. Yeah, buddy. How cool is this, Mommy? Getting another classic back on the road. Smooth, no weird noises. The brakes are working, it idles. Everything seems pretty happy. Show you guys a little 3 on the tree action. Start out in 1st. Get her rolling pretty good. Go up and over to 2nd. Now you're cruising in 2nd. Once you get it wound down in 2nd, you drop it straight down into 3rd. and you're good to start just cruising along. What a good driving old truck.
I jacked it up, put on lip kit, off-road tires with B-locks on. Dude, it's got a little attitude, ain't it grand? It does the mud, as well as the sand. It defines me who I am. It's more than practical, it's a statement. If you ever think I'll sell it, good luck. American made, and it's my truck.
There goes the 65 F100. Jonathan Goolsby's dad is driving it. He used to drive that thing when he was younger. It's bought new by his grandpa, I believe. Pretty cool. So yeah, now you're gonna make some new memories with it.
Go make some new memories, yep. The plan is to try to keep it running for sure until 2065. That's 100 years. And just like I've passed it along to my son, we're gonna pass it along to his oldest daughter, Zella, teach her to drive it. She's only 3 now. But teach her to drive it when she gets to be about 14, 15, 16. So we say we've had 5 generations driving this truck from the family. I think my grandfather would be pretty happy with that.
I definitely think he would be. Well, that's awesome.
It is awesome.